Tokyo Disney Resort is a bucket list destination for any Disney Parks fan, but it can be really hard to tell which rides are the same as in other Disney parks and which ones are unique to Tokyo. As someone who's been lucky enough to visit every Disney park in the world and has now been living in Tokyo for 5 years, this is a question that I get a lot, and I just wanted to make one cohesive video where you can find all of the information about which rides are the same elsewhere and which ones are unique to here. So Tokyo Disney Resort is home to two very different theme parks. Tokyo Disneyland, which is the quintessential Disney theme park with a big castle in the middle, and DisneySea, which is utterly unique and beautiful with a big volcano in the middle. Both parks do have rides exclusive to Tokyo, but both parks also have rides that you can find in other Disney parks around the world. But again, it can be very hard to tell just how different they are from the rides you might have been on before, and if they're worth doing or if you can skip them if you've done it somewhere else. In this video, I'm going to show you which rides you may have already done at other Disney parks, which ones are unique to Tokyo Disney, and even which rides use English so that you can make an informed decision about which rides to prioritize and which rides you may be able to skip. Now, before we get started, to make this even simpler, I have created a document that you'll find in the description. It's totally free download, and you can just choose which resorts you've been to before, and I give you a breakdown of which rides are different to the ones at that resort and which ones are the same. I give each one a score out of 5, 1 meaning it's basically identical, and 5 meaning it's completely unique to Tokyo Disney. So, while this video will really dive into each ride and let you see which ones are for you and which ones are not, that's just a really quick reference guide so you can very quickly see which rides are unique here and which ones are the same as other parks you've already been to. Okay, so we're going to start at Tokyo Disneyland, which has way more rides, full stop, and it also has way more rides that you can find at other Disney parks. When it was first built, it was more or less a copy of the Magic Kingdom in Florida, so a lot of rides are copied from there, but they also picked and chose some rides that they liked from California's Disneyland as well. And then after that, many of them were cloned in Paris and Hong Kong and even Shanghai, so some rides are even the same or very similar as the ones in those parks that opened after Tokyo Disneyland did. So first off is a ride that I really like. It's a small little thing. It's one of the first rides you'll encounter when you come in the park if you just walk in a straight line forward, and this is the Omnibus. This is a little double-decker bus that just does a small circle around the hub in front of the castle. It's a very sweet little thing, and it's a lovely way to sit down and rest your feet. It never has a long wait, and I really like it. You can find an omnibus that's very similar to this in the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World and also in Disneyland in California, but of course this ride offers views of the park, so you're looking at a very different park. So whilst the ride vehicle itself is the same, the experience is a little bit different. I feel like if, you know, this isn't a big ride, if this is something you fancy doing, you're gonna do it. I recommend it because it's never longer than a 10-minute wait. Okay, next up, also in World Bazaar, our version of Main Street, is the Penny Arcade. I love it in here. You get all of these classic arcade machines. A lot of them have instructions in English because they've been imported and found around the world. It's a really sweet little area. Now, you may know that they used to have these in Disneyland in California and in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, but they've both since been removed to add more shopping space. I really admire that Tokyo haven't done this and they keep this thing here. People do use them, but I'm sure it doesn't make that much money. You do pay per play, but especially with the yen being what it is now, I really like going in there and exploring it a bit and trying out some of the games. If you're into squashed pennies, there are a lot of those in here too. And yeah, this is the only one in a Disney park now, so it has that going for it as well. Okay, we're gonna head into Adventureland now, and this is a weird one because every other Disney castle park has this, except for Shanghai, and that's a train. But Tokyo's is very different because in Disneyland, in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, in Disneyland Paris, and in Hong Kong Disneyland, the train goes all the way around the park. It has multiple stations, and it's actually a method of transport around the park. You can get on at one station, get off at another one. It gives you a tour of the whole park. Good stuff. Lovely. The one in Tokyo is different because it only travels around Adventureland and Westernland, our version of Frontierland. And Critter Country as well. You see Splash Mountain from there. But yeah, it is that same steam train ride experience, which is great. But there's only one station, and you're just going around one half of the park. This train ride in Tokyo does have a copy of the Primeval World diorama that you can find on the Disneyland Railroad at Disneyland, which some of you may know was taken from the Ford Magic Skyway that Walt Disney himself worked with Imagineers to build at the 1964 New York World's Fair, where It's a Small World was also premiered, which we'll get to a little bit later. So yeah, if you've been on the train at Disneyland before, you'll have already seen this diorama, so that might make this slightly less appealing to you. If you haven't done that and you want to see this part of Disney theme park history, or you just want to get some nice views of Tokyo Disneyland from this elevated train while you wave to passers-by, or I guess you're the passerby, you're waving to standers still, then yeah, check this one out. It's a nice little sit-down ride, and it's normally a 20 to 30-minute wait, so not so bad. Okie dokie, the next one gives us quite a lot to talk about. Pirates of the Caribbean. So, this ride is most similar to the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland. Disneyland in California has the longest Pirates of the Caribbean ride. It was the original, the first one ever built, and it has this delightful scene where you go past the Blue Bayou restaurant and you're floating along this quiet bayou and you can see the fireflies and hear this guy playing the banjo on his porch before you shoot down into the caves and sort of start the ride proper. Tokyo basically copied all of this from the California version. The only thing they really cut out significantly was that on California's you go up a climb hill at the end to come back up that drop you've done. Whereas in Tokyo, they let you get off the ride at the bottom of there and then it does that without anyone on it. So you're not really missing anything. California have made a few updates to theirs over the years that Tokyo hasn't. Tokyo did add Jack Sparrow and Davy Jones in the mist effect in there. But a recurring theme in this video you'll see is that Tokyo tend not to really keep adding things to their rides, whereas I feel like especially the American parks tend to do that a lot. So if you've been on the one in California, this may be worth skipping. It's 95% the same. However, there is one controversial part of the ride that you may be nostalgic for and may want to see. You perhaps already know this was quite big news at the time. In every version of Pirates of the Caribbean, except this one, they changed an old scene which depicts an auctioneer selling women off to lusty pirates. Amongst a few other things, Tokyo haven't changed that. We had a 6-month refurb a couple of years ago, and we were all certain that they were taking that out, and they didn't. So if you remember the ride having these scenes in the other parks from a few years ago, and you'd like to see that again, this may be worth checking out. However, you will find that it's very, very similar to the Californian version. Florida's is a fair bit shorter, so here you do get some extra scenes. Paris's is very different, so I would check this out to give you an idea of the classic version that inspired the version they made in Disneyland Paris, which is absolutely fantastic. And then Shanghai's is just a completely different beast is totally different. It's a completely different ride altogether. So if you've done that, definitely check this out because you'll get that classic Pirates of the Caribbean experience. One last thing about this ride that's really surprising but kind of awesome for us is that it's basically all in English. The only thing that's in Japanese is the skull and crossbones that talks before the drop into the caves. All of the pirates all use the classic dialogue from the American versions of the ride, so you'll even get to experience it all in English if you check it out as well, which is pretty cool. Okie dokie, next is another one that, again, has been updated a lot in the American parks, but a little bit here, but not as much, and that's Jungle Cruise. This was updated around a decade ago to add some night lighting, and they even added some music, which makes it stand out from the other ones. But I think for the general person, this is going to feel very, very similar to the other rides you've done. There are these small changes, small differences. So if you're a super parks nerd, you may want to check it out. But if you're a super Disney parks nerd, you're going to want to check everything out. You know, if you're someone who is a bit more casual and you're wondering, maybe you've got one day at each park in Tokyo, right? And you want to know which rides you can get away with skipping. This is pretty similar to the other ones around the world. Having said that, at nighttime it does have this lovely lighting, and it's worth doing for sure. It has a really nice projection mapped finale in the caves as well that's unique to Tokyo. So, depending on the type of person you are, you may want to check this out, or you may be happy to skip it. Another controversial one up next. This is the actual name of this attraction. The Enchanted Tiki Room Stitch presents Aloha Ikomo Mai. Yeah, that's the real name, and it's totally ridiculous. As you may have gathered from the title, this is the classic Enchanted Tiki Room attraction, which, when it first premiered at Disneyland in California, was groundbreaking in its use of audio animatronics. It's been widely documented. I'm not going to get too deep into any of that here. The big difference with this one is Stitch is in it. And this is a Stitch animatronic. It's really, really sweet. This is another ride or attraction, that doesn't get a very long wait. And even if you do, the longest you have to wait for this is just waiting for the next showing. And you can do that undercover, sitting down in this nice little area. So this is one, if you have a spare 10 minutes or you just want to sit down, get out of the heat in the summer, get out of the cold in the winter, go and check this out. It's sweet, it's fun, I like it. Next attraction on the list, we're heading into Western Land, which is what Tokyo call their Frontierland. And here we find the Western Land Shooting Gallery. There are shooting galleries in Disneyland in California, in Walt Disney World, and in Disneyland Paris. But what's pretty cool about these is that they're all different. So you may want to go and check out Tokyo's. One big difference here is if you go on a busy day, you may have to wait like 20 or 30 minutes for this thing, or even longer, which I don't think happens anywhere else. But the fans here just love all of it, you know, which is super, super cool. But it means that there's queues for everything if you come on a busy day. And we're on to another classic that many people will be nostalgic for that you can still check out in Tokyo Disneyland, and that's the Country Bear Theater, which shows Country Bear Jamboree. We're actually showing a summer version right now, Country Bear Jamboree Vacation Hoedown, which was really exciting because they stopped doing these in 2020. And now it's back. And they haven't announced that the Christmas version will be returning, but this summer version is ending the day before the Christmas event officially starts. So I suspect that this is going to end, and then they're going to have the Christmas version of the show at Christmas as well, which is super, super cool. This show flits between Japanese and English, but it is the classic version of the show. It's not whatever Florida are doing, adding Disney songs into it. I'm hoping that's not too popular, because I worry that I could really see that kind of thing happening here. You know, the fans here would probably embrace that and be into it. But for now, you can get the classic Country Bear Jamboree show, I guess, just in spring. And then the summer version from June through to November, which is a little weird. And then the Christmas version, I suspect. That's not confirmed yet, but it seems pretty likely from the dates. Next up is one I won't spend too much time on because, again, this is one that really shows you the park more than the actual ride. So you're looking at a different theme park, so of course it's going to be different. But the Mark Twain Riverboat is another one that you don't have to wait very long for. You can get straight on and get some lovely views of Big Thunder Mountain, Splash Mountain, and also the Rivers of America. It takes you back through there, and it really teleports you so far away from suburban Chiba next to Tokyo. You know, you've been in this dense city full of trains and roads and these big gray buildings, and now you're like in the middle of the wilderness. It's super, super cool. But yeah, if this is your kind of thing, maybe you'll check it out. But there's no like big surprises on this. If you've done it elsewhere, you may be happy to skip this one. One thing that you do get very nice views of from the Mark Twain Riverboat is Tom Sawyer Island. Now, Tom Sawyer Island used to be at Disneyland Resort, the Disneyland Park, and they since changed it to Pirate's Lair. But it's the same kind of idea. You take a raft over to the island and you explore the island, mostly for young kids, but if you have young kids, they are a great excuse to check this out because it's a really fun area and it really takes you away from some of the crowds that are especially a problem at Tokyo Disneyland because the park is basically one big thick path that most guests are walking along most of the time. It can be hard to find these little areas that you can get away from the crowds, but this is for sure one of them. The Magic Kingdom in Florida does still have Tom Sawyer Island, so you may not be interested in this one if you've done that. Tokyo's is a little bit different, but not super different, so you can decide for yourself. This next one is very similar to the version in Florida, and quite different to the versions in California and Paris, and that is the classic Runaway Mine Train roller coaster, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. The version in Tokyo is more or less a copy of the one in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, just with an extra little dip at the end. There's very, very tiny changes. If it's been a couple of years since you've done the one in Florida, you probably won't even notice the differences. Unfortunately, we don't have the epic Big Thunder Mountain being on an island in the middle of the rivers like they do in Paris, and we also don't have the awesome finale boulder scene with all the smoke that's in California, but this is your classic Big Thunder Mountain experience. So if you're nostalgic for that, or you haven't done the one in Florida and you want to see what this version's like, yeah, check this one out. Okay, we've had a few controversial things already, but I think there is no ride more controversial than this next one. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because I like having a YouTube channel and I like having an audience, and I'm not ready to mess that up just yet. You know what I'm talking about, Splash Mountain. So, the American parks recently changed their Splash Mountains into Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Tokyo did not. So we now have the only Splash Mountain in the world, so it's totally unique to here. If you want to go a few years back and roll the clocks back, this is a similar layout to Florida's. It's quite similar to Florida's, but there are some key differences as well that make this one stand out. Mainly just the outside of the ride, the exterior, because the entire area of Critter Country was made just for this ride. If you look at Critter Country, the whole land is basically just a big Splash Mountain. It's all carved together, which makes it really beautiful. Again, I don't want to talk about this one too much because it ruffles some feathers, but I will just end by saying the lead designer of the original version, Tony Baxter, said that Tokyo Disney was always the best version, so he's glad that it's the only one left. And who knows how long it will be left for, so check this one out while you can. Again, this is mostly in Japanese, but there are a couple of songs in the ride that use the English words, so you do get a little something in there. Right next to Splash Mountain are the Beaver Brothers Explorer canoes. These are canoes you can take through the rivers of America. They do also have canoe rides in other Disney parks. You may have done those before, you may not. Again, this is one where you're looking at the park while you're on it, right? So, of course, it's going to be different in that way, but in the way that it's a canoe and you're rowing a canoe, it's going to be very similar to the other ones. I don't really have anything else to say about that. Next up is Alice's Tea Party over in Fantasyland now, and although this has a unique name, none of the other ones are called Alice's Tea Party. They're called the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. This is the Teacups ride. It's a spinny Teacups ride. It's got the Dormouse in the middle, which is super cool. You know what you're getting with this one. Nearby, you can find It's a Small World, which has the beautiful exterior facade that you'll find in Disneyland in California, or even similar to the ones in Hong Kong and Paris. The actual ride is almost identical to the one in Florida, or at least it was, until Tokyo updated theirs to add characters from Disney movies, which makes it more similar to the ones in Hong Kong and California, which also did that. Unlike California, this doesn't have the outdoor section, which is a shame. We also don't get the Christmas overlays on here, which is a really big shame because I adore that, especially the exterior with all the Christmas lights on it. Oh, just brilliant, fantastic. Wish we would do that. But for some reason, we're getting Groot instead? For reasons? That's so weird. I can't get over that. Again, I feel like for the average person, if you've done It's a Small World somewhere else, then you'll feel like this is very similar. Except if you've done it without the Disney characters, it might be fun to go on here with the Disney characters and try to spot them all. But this is your classic world of laughter, world of tears, so much that we share, so it's time to declare this is somewhat similar to the other versions around the world, but slightly different. Next is Castle Carousel. It's a carousel, just like the other ones. Moving on. Snow White's Adventures is where it gets a bit more interesting. This one really has been impacted by that aspect that I've talked about, where Tokyo Disney tend not to update things or change things. This is still the old, brutal version of Snow White. It has tons of wicked queens in there and old hags. It's terrifying. Most of the ride is scary, except for the cottage, where you do see Snow White and you see the dwarves dancing around. Everything else in the ride is loud, dark, scary, with jump scares, and the ride ends with you being crushed by a boulder. So if you want that really classic Snow White Adventures experience, check this one out. If you missed the old version from Florida, this was most similar to that, although Florida's changed a lot more over the years, even before it was destroyed. So if you're nostalgic for that version, definitely check this out. And just do it. It's so cool. It's so ridiculous. And I could kind of imagine us changing it at some point. So check it out while you can, because Disney does not do this type of ride anymore. Another attraction that used to really stand out at Tokyo Disney and make people say, what? Was the Mystery Castle Tour. So when you see Cinderella Castle and you think, oh, it's so beautiful, and oh, it's Cinderella's castle, right? There must be something pretty inside there. You used to be able to take a tour of the castle, which would then be derailed by Disney villains who would try to harass you until eventually you come face to face with a massive animatronic of the Horned King. Very, very strange. It's not hard to see why they changed it, although it is disappointing. But now, what you'll find inside the castle is Cinderella's Fairy Tale Hall, which, for better or worse, is exactly what you would expect the inside of Cinderella Castle to look like. So we don't have a restaurant inside ours, we don't have a secret hotel room that 3 people have stayed in ever. We have this walkthrough, which is a cute little thing. You get some nice views when you're coming out there of Fantasyland from above, and you can even see DisneySea in the distance, which is sweet. And inside there, it's basically a lot of photo ops. If you have a little princess who's into this sort of thing, go in there and check it out. Otherwise, you can probably get away with skipping it, and you're not going to be missing too much. Next up is Dumbo the Flying Elephant. The only thing that's worth saying here, and the amount you care about this will vary on how much of a Disney nerd you are, but this is the only version that has the old style of Dumbos. Every other one has the new ones. There are more Dumbos on there, and the design of the arms that lift them up have these cogs and things that are a lot more pretty. Ours is the old school classic Dumbo. It doesn't go over the water. It's old Dumbo, but I mean, you go around in a circle and you move the toggle to go up and down. You can pretty much know what to expect here. One thing that makes ours stand out, though, is that you can see the Haunted Mansion from it, which might be interesting to some of you. We'll get to the Haunted Mansion a little bit later on, but next is one that is completely unique to Tokyo Disney, so there's not much to say about it. The Enchanted Tale of Beauty and the Beast. There's no other Disney ride like it. There's no other ride like this anywhere else in the world. Must do. Definitely do this one. Buy a DPA and skip the queue if you can. Yeah, just... do the thing. It's really good. Next up, Peter Pan's Flight. Now, Tokyo's, again, is slightly unique in some ways. It's still that very classic experience of getting in a little pirate ship and flying over London and then Neverland until you get to Captain Hook's pirate ship and see him fighting out with Peter Pan. Until eventually Peter Pan commandeers the ship and flies us back. Again, this has had very few updates over the years, so it's a really classic kind of feel. Never has a long wait, so I would recommend checking it out. It is slightly different to the other ones. It will feel quite short compared to the one in Paris, and especially the one in Shanghai. And even feels a little bit dated at times, but you know what you're getting with this thing. Classic Disney attraction. I always try to hit it. I absolutely love it. Now, this next one is maybe the first one that's almost an exact copy of the other ones. And trust me, I know this ride like the back of my hand because I spent a year recreating it in pixel art, which you can find on this channel. Oh god, that was so much work. I much prefer making these videos now. It's a lot more fun. And I can help people to have an amazing time when they come to Tokyo Disney, or share Tokyo Disney with people who don't know that much about it. So I'm having a lovely old time now. But yes, I'm talking about Pinocchio's Daring Journey. This one is basically exactly the same in California and Paris. There are some tiny differences, really tiny differences, that basically come down to the art style of certain things in the ride, but it's minutiae. It's just tiny little things. If you've done this in Paris or California and you're strapped for time in Tokyo, skip this one. You've done it before. One that you have not done before anywhere else in the world is Pooh's Honey Hunt. Now, be warned. This is a very different ride to the ones you'll find in the Magic Kingdom, in Disneyland, and in Shanghai Disneyland, and Hong Kong Disneyland. This is very, very different to all of those. This is a don't miss ride. It's one of the best in the park. You have to check this one out. I'll just leave it there. It's totally different. It's totally unique to Tokyo, despite still being about that tubby little cubby all stuffed with fluff. Next up, one of my personal favorites at the entire resort. Absolute classic. The Haunted Mansion. Now, I don't like that it's in Fantasyland, which is something unique to Tokyo, but that's kind of a small nitty pick. This is one that was copied almost exactly from the Magic Kingdom in Florida, but yet again, Florida have changed theirs over years, whereas Tokyo haven't. This means we still have the physical hitchhiking ghosts that jump into your buggy at the end, rather than the CGI ones Florida added. We do also have this old spider scene, which I'm not too keen on, but it's made up for by the fact that we still have the Beating Heart Bride, the classic one. Again, this is going to be super nostalgic for a lot of people who've done the Haunted Mansion in the past at other parks and seen it change. You're going to be able to go back in time with this one. If you've only done Phantom Manor in Paris, then check this out because it's quintessential classic Disney Haunted Mansion. If you want to go back to the 70s when Haunted Mansion opened in Florida and see what that was like, that's this right here. Now, I do want to just quickly mention Haunted Mansion has a holiday overlay, Haunted Mansion Holiday Nightmare. The only other park that does this to their Haunted Mansion ride is Disneyland in California. However, I just said this is a copy of the Haunted Mansion in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, which is longer than the one in California. So this means Haunted Mansion Holiday Nightmare is also longer, because it's the same ride. So we get 2 Jack figures, as well as some other scenes that are quite different. So I think if you're a fan of the one in California and you've done it before, I would still check Tokyo's out. It's pretty different, it's pretty cool. Now, one thing you can guarantee being absolutely identical across different Disney parks are 3D shows. This is no exception, except for the fact that it's in Japanese instead of English. Mickey's PhilharMagic. If you've done it elsewhere, you've done it. I guess the only caveat to that would be that we do have a purpose-built theater for it, like they do in Florida and Hong Kong, whereas Paris and California have used existing theaters, so it hasn't quite had the same effect, but to be honest, it's not that fun hearing the songs in Japanese if you're used to them in English. I would only really check this one out if you haven't done it before. It may be worth noting that we did get the Coco update, so it might have been a while since you've done it in other parks. You might not have seen the Coco scene, and you might want to see that. Ugh, too many C's. We're not even at DisneySea yet. Yeah, it's the same 3D show as the other parks, but it's in Japanese. Let's go to Toontown, which once upon a time was almost exactly the same as the one in California, just kind of a mirror image of it. But California's got updated, ours didn't, so now they're kind of different. We have Gadget's Go Coaster, which is exactly the same as California's used to be. They changed it a little bit, but if you've done it there, you've basically done it. This is your Barnstormer type of roller coaster. You can take one look at it and figure out what it's all about, you know. If you're someone who likes to get on every coaster in a park, or you're someone with kids who want to get on the roller coasters, check this one out. If not, you may be happy to skip it. You know what this is about. You can make your own mind up. Goofy's Paint and Playhouse is a tiny little thing, but it's worth talking about, I think. I really like it because it reminds me of Interventions at Epcot. It's just a small thing. You see this projection mapped room in Goofy's house, and you use a Toy Story Mania style blaster to paint the walls. It's a super quick little experience. It's normally only got a 5 or 10 minute long queue. It's just something fun to do in Toontown while you're there. It's totally unique to Tokyo, and there's nothing else to say about it. Another thing I'm not going to talk much about is Chip 'n Dale's Treehouse. It's the same as the one in California. It's a tiny little treehouse you can walk around. Toon Park is also a tiny little area that used to be in California, but now I don't think is anymore. I haven't been to California in a while. Check out my Patreon if you want to pay for me to go to California soon. I would love to go back. And you do also get to watch these videos before anybody else and with no adverts. So a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my Patreon. I love you all. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Donald's Boat is another one that is identical to the one in California. Minnie's House, again. As I said, a lot of Toontown was just copied over. And next up is a wacky ride that I love. It's Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. You can only find this ride in Tokyo and California. There are very, very tiny differences now. Again, because Tokyo haven't changed it and California did. They notoriously put a trench coat on Jessica Rabbit for reasons. Again, I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff here, but Tokyo has the classic version where we didn't do that. So if you've done it in California, you may want to do this for nostalgia's sake. If you haven't done it in California, do check this out. Even if the queue is like 30 minutes, which it often is, the queue is really, really good too, and you want to spend some time walking through there. It's not a queue you want to just walk through, you know? It's a queue you want to spend some time in. Do this ride when you come. It's the best. Another type of ride that falls into the same category as 3D shows, where it's literally exactly the same, is Star Tours. This is a 3D simulator, where the queue is the best part of the ride, and Tokyo's is exactly the same as the other ones. We're not doing the Ahsoka sequences that I think the other parks around the world are doing right now, so that's something that's different, I guess. Our queue is also slightly longer, and we have an extra area in the queue that's quite interesting, but other than that, it's Star Tours. If you've done it elsewhere, you can probably skip it here. The next one is one that you'll be familiar with if you watched my Every Ride at Tokyo Disneyland Ranked video, because this was right at the bottom. This is Stitch Encounter. This formerly was in Hong Kong Disneyland, actually in the same building as Space Mountain, which is interesting. and continues to operate in Shanghai Disneyland and Walt Disney Studios Park, although there it's called Stitch Live instead. This is a Turtle Talk type attraction, if you're familiar with that, where you go in and you talk to Stitch. The only thing that makes it unique in Tokyo Disneyland is that he only speaks Japanese, so unless you're fluent in Japanese, I would not recommend trying this one out. And even if you are, there are better uses for your time anyway. Oh, every time I mention this next ride now, it just makes me think I shouldn't have bothered making a video, but I make videos every week. I have to do something, right? This next ride is not going to be there for much longer, and it's Space Mountain. So just in case you're curious about it, the track layout is identical in California and Hong Kong's versions, but those both have onboard audio, so they have music playing in the vehicle while you go around. The one in Tokyo doesn't, which is unique in some ways. If you happen to be watching this video right when it comes out and you're visiting Tokyo Disney in the next 2 months, then you might want to check this out. It is pretty unique, but whatever we get next is going to be even more special. And right next to Space Mountain is another ride that's getting replaced soon, which shocked everybody, Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters. Again, it's not going to be tremendously useful unless you're watching this video right now and visiting very, very soon, but this is basically exactly the same as the ones in Paris, California, formerly Hong Kong. Slightly different to Florida's, but the same idea, you know what it is. Next up is a ride in Tomorrowland that is pretty safe because it just got built a few years ago, the Happy Ride with Baymax. Whilst this is technically one of a kind to Tokyo, this exact same ride system can be found in Alien Swirling Saucers in the Hollywood Studios Park at Walt Disney World, Mater's Junkyard Jamboree in Cars Land at Disney California Adventure, and also the Woody's Roundup ride in the Toy Story area of Shanghai Disneyland. It's a little spinny ride, but Baymax is quite special in that it has these really colorful, vibrant lights at nighttime, and every ride through plays one of 6 original songs, which, come to think of it, doesn't the Mater ride in Cars Land also do that? But what that doesn't do is have crazy guests who are dancing next to the ride for every single song, and cast members who, while operating the ride, are also dancing along with every song. So ours is kind of special, but I really think that this ride is something you have to go and look at when you visit. There's probably no need for you to ride it unless you're absolutely intent on doing so. It's still one of the most popular rides in the park, and it is not worth the wait 99% of the time. But do go have a little dance next to it and just soak up the vibes, you know? And the last ride on our list at Tokyo Disneyland is Monsters Inc. Ride and Go Seek. This is a Monsters Inc. dark ride, and there is one other Monsters Inc. dark ride in the world, but it is very different to this one. Notoriously rethemed from the classic Imagineering blunder that was Superstar Limo, the Monsters Inc. ride in California Adventure is nothing compared to this one. Not only does this have fantastic animatronics that move much more fluidly, an amazing show building and queue which tie in perfectly with the Monsters Inc. universe, but it also has this interactive flashlights that you shine on the different Monsters Inc. helmets you find, and every time you shine it on one, something happens in response. I absolutely love this ride. You should definitely check it out when you come to visit, no matter which Disney parks you've been to before. Okay, now that we've ticked off every ride at Tokyo Disneyland, we're going next door to Tokyo DisneySea. And as you might expect, a lot of these rides are completely unique to DisneySea, as this is such a unique park. But what you might not expect is there are actually quite a lot of rides here that you may have ridden before in other parks. They're just dressed up a lot more nicely. Either way, this will be a lot quicker than Tokyo Disneyland because there are just a lot less rides at DisneySea. Now, I haven't actually been to Fantasy Springs yet. I'm going in a week. That's gonna be my next video after this one, and probably the next 20 after that, because I'm gonna have so much to talk about. But we know for a fact that all 4 of those rides are completely unique to Tokyo, so yeah, go on all of those if you can. The first one on this list, though, is the DisneySea Transit Steamer Line. Again, this is a transportation ride which takes you through the park. I absolutely love this one because DisneySea is just so pretty, and seeing it from this low vantage point in the water, it's all just gorgeous, and having this invitation to just sit there and move through at this steady pace and take all of it in, I really highly recommend this one. Yes, it's a slow-moving transportation ride. Don't expect any. There's not like some hidden animatronics in there or something, but you just get to look at this gorgeous, gorgeous park. The newest ride in the park prior to Fantasy Springs opening was Soaring Fantastic Flight, and as you might expect, this is basically the same ride as the Soaring Around the World rides that you get in Epcot, Disney California Adventure, and Shanghai Disneyland. It does have a slightly different finale, as all of them do. Unsurprisingly, this one takes you through Tokyo and then finishes up at DisneySea, which is pretty cool. The best part of the ride, though, is not the ride, it's the pre-show. The pre-show is gorgeous, it's pretty subtle and understated, so don't go in expecting something to blow your mind like one of the other pre-shows in this park will do. But it's very, very pretty, and I do think even if you've done soaring in other parks, it is worth checking this out, unless it's gonna eat up 3 hours of your day, which is sometimes the case. Next up is a walkthrough attraction, which I feel like is the beating heart of the entire park. Fortress Explorations, this is the palace castle thing that you see in front of the volcano when you walk in the park. No queue, so just walk through this place, check it out, discover all of it, and don't leave until you've found the Chamber of Planets, because that place is just stunning. So definitely do this. Another one unique to Tokyo DisneySea is Venetian gondolas. While you can take one look at this thing and fully understand what you're gonna get, it is really, really sweet, once again, to see the park from this low vantage point, and also it really does soak you up in this Venetian area of the park. It's a lovely slow-moving ride which really perfectly captures that romantic side of DisneySea. You know, this park was created to appeal to couples coming on dates, and this ride really, I think, is the perfect example of that. Over in American Waterfront, inside the SS Columbia steamship, you can find Turtle Talk, which is identical to the versions in other Disney parks. I touched on this earlier because it's exactly the same premise as Stitch Encounter. You go into a room and there's a big screen and someone hands a microphone around and you get to talk to the character. Again, this is entirely in Japanese, so I wouldn't recommend checking this one out. It does have more presence and more oomph than Stitch Encounter does next door, just because of the way it's presented, like everything else in this park, but I wouldn't waste your time with this one either. Right next to it, however, is a ride I would definitely waste your time with, Tower of Terror. Now, this is a tricky one because there are Tower of Terror rides around the world. This one is very different, but also not as different as you might think it is. So let me explain. I was a little disappointed the first time I rode this because the exterior of the ride is gorgeous and so different to anything you've seen before. The queue tells this incredible story. The pre-show, there's a special effect in there that will just knock your socks off. And then when you get into the ride, it suddenly feels quite familiar. It has the same kind of special effects and basically the same scenes as you would have seen in the old Tower of Terror that used to be in California Adventure, or the one that's still in Paris, or even the one in Florida that's a little bit different. Once you get on the ride vehicle itself, this does start to feel a bit more familiar than you might be expecting. However, it's definitely worth checking out. Just for the pre-show alone, I think is just jaw-dropping. And the way they managed to tell this story through the entire queue and the pre-show and the ride, yeah, you have to do this one. It's don't miss. Another transportation ride that's unique to DisneySea is DisneySea Electric Railway. This is an elevated electric tram type system. Again, it just gives you gorgeous views of this gorgeous park, so what's not to like? Check it out. Again, this is another one that gets like 10 to 15 minute long queues, which you really appreciate in a day at DisneySea because most of the rides you want to do end up being 2 hours long or something, so there's no reason to miss out on this one. The next one is one of those rides that gets an incredibly long queue. It's enormously popular here, and you've probably already done it elsewhere. This is Toy Story Mania. Now, if you looked at it, you might think this is like Tower of Terror, where the ride's going to be quite different and the queue and everything is going to be super different because the exterior is absolutely gorgeous. And the queue is different to the other parts, and I think slightly better, but the ride is identical. It's another screen-based ride, right? Like, of course it is. You're looking at the exact same things as you've seen before. So, again, I think if you've got the time, maybe go in and check it out, but if you're wondering what you can skip, and you've done this in other parks before, give it a miss. Go in and check out Toyville Trolley Park, though, because that's really, really pretty around there. And the last transportation ride we're going to talk about is big city vehicles. This isn't a transportation ride in the strictest sense because you get off and on in the same location, but it does just take you through the streets of American waterfront at a really casual pace. I'm just repeating myself at this point, but it gives you a lovely view of the park and you get to sit and take it all in, which I recommend. I think it's really, really nice. This next one is super unique. It was the first ever trackless ride to be designed. There's a little asterisk on there because Pooh's Honey Hunt ended up opening first, but this ride was being designed first. Aquatopia in the Port Discovery area of the park is just really unique. Unique is the perfect word for it. Is it a breathtaking ride? No. Is it a fun little spinny flat ride type thing that's really unique? Yes, I think it's great. It's normally a 15 to 30 minute long queue. I recommend checking it out. Right next to Aquatopia is Nemo and Friends Sea Rider, and whilst this is 100% unique to Tokyo DisneySea, you can probably miss it. I don't know, if you love Nemo, go and check this thing out. Again, it doesn't get huge waits, so you may as well. It's just a little disappointing as this ride system was made for the previous attraction, Storm Rider. And this is a huge simulator like Star Tours, but way bigger. And that ride system just doesn't seem like the best fit for what essentially ends up being a cute little tour around Nemo under the sea places. Like, you get a little bit of mild peril, as they would describe it if it was on the back of a DVD box. But I don't know, you won't leave the park thinking this was your favorite ride, but it might be a little sleeper hit with you. I don't know. This does have randomized sequences as well, so if you do ride it and you absolutely love it, there's a reason to go around on it again. It doesn't have nearly as many combinations and sequences as Star Tours does, but it does have a few different ones, so you might catch something different the next time you ride it. This next ride is, in my opinion, one of the best rides in the park, one of the best rides in the resort, one of the best rides in the world. And there is one other one in the world, and there are large differences, and there are also large similarities. I'm talking about Indiana Jones Adventure Temple of the Crystal Skull. Yes, this ride is phenomenal. I absolutely love this thing. You should ride it, full stop. But if you've been to California, you're obviously going to compare it to that one. It is exactly the same ride layout. It's exactly the same ride, essentially. A lot of the major scenes are the same. Indiana Jones opening the door at the beginning, the boulder coming down at the end. But a lot of the things in between that are very, very different. And to be honest, if you've ridden Indiana Jones in California, you'll know that that ride is good enough to ride again and again 100 times anyway. So you would probably just want to do it again, even if it was completely identical. But it very much is not. There are considerable differences to this one, including the whirlpool in the middle, and just the whole queue and story to this one is very different. 100%, whether you've done the one in California or not, check this thing out. It's an absolute beast. Next door to Indiana Jones is an interesting one. This is Raging Spirits. This is a small looping roller coaster, and it's exactly the same as a ride at Disneyland Paris, but there it's an Indiana Jones ride. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril. I'm not going to try to say it in French. I've done that in previous videos. It was not very good. Another thing I've said in previous videos, which I'm going to repeat right now, is that it's really funny because I'm from England. I grew up going to Paris a little bit, and that ride is notoriously rough. The Indiana Jones coaster there is notoriously rough and bumpy because it hasn't been maintained very well. Well, Oriental Land Company, the people who own Tokyo Disney Resort, are excellent at maintenance. They look after these things so well. There's a reason Space Mountain is still running after 41 years, and they only just had to close the thing. So what's funny is I was going on this, just sort of, I wasn't thinking about it that much, but just instinctively thinking, oh, this is like the one in Paris, it's going to be bumpy, it's going to be rough. And it is so smooth that it's borderline boring. It's like almost tedious. But in that DisneySea way, it has some great little special effects, it has awesome theming, and it gives you some great views of the park, and even some little views of Fantasy Springs now, which is quite neat. This also has a single rider queue. Indiana Jones does as well, I forgot to mention. Only those two rides have single rider in the whole resort, sadly. But Indiana Jones is fantastic, and this is a nice one to be able to get on quickly if you don't mind a single rider queue, or if you get a priority pass. Yeah, check this one out. It's a neat little thing. I'll quickly whiz through a couple of these because they're flat rides. The Caravan Carousel, it's about as good of a carousel as you could get. It's double tiered. It plays versions of Aladdin music. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. Sometimes you can ride on a genie. I mean, who wouldn't want that? It's a very, very pretty double-tier carousel. I don't know what else to tell you. If you're into that kind of thing, then you're going to do it, right? The other one is Jasmine's Flying Carpets. I have a bone to pick with this one. I just think it's in the wrong area of the park. Like, all of the fancy, beautiful, palace-y stuff is at the other side of Arabian Coast. Here is supposed to be the port that's a little bit run down, and then we've got these gleaming white towers next to this thing. But I know, I'm a nerd and I'm nitpicking. It's an uppy-downy, carpety, Dumbo-y ride. You're gonna do it if you're gonna do it, you know? Right next to it, though, is Sinbad's Storybook Voyage. This is one of my favorite rides in the world. I adore this thing. It's a slow-moving boat ride like It's a Small World, but it sort of combines the feeling of It's a Small World, like these really small figures and this kind of simplified storybook-style aesthetic, with something like Pirates of the Caribbean, which has very separate scenes and different areas and takes you on more of a journey. It's just very, very good. And to be perfectly honest, yes, it has amazing animatronics and beautiful sets and just such a different, unique, and cohesive visual style, which I don't think we get very often in rides. We often, you know, especially rides that are based on movies, they try to make it look as much like the movie as possible. Well, Sinbad doesn't have a movie, so they were able to create their own aesthetic, which feels like you've jumped into a storybook or something. Everything's miniature, but that just only goes to further enhance the extraordinary range of motion that these figures have, because they're so small but they move so fluidly. It's like hypnotic. Oh, I could just go on and on and on about this ride. And then it all has an amazing Alan Menken soundtrack. What's not to like? Yeah, definitely check this one out. There's nothing like this anywhere else. The other major attraction in Arabian Coast is the Magic Lamp Theatre. This is an interesting one. It's not going to be your favorite attraction in the park, but it is 100% unique to DisneySea, and it has a nifty little pre-show, and the way it combines live performers with a 3D show is pretty interesting and impressive. The whole thing's in Japanese, so a lot of the dialogue will go over your head, and it's just simply not that breathtaking, especially compared to other things in the park, but it is unique to DisneySea, if that's the question. Ariel's Playground is another walk-through attraction. I think this is a real hidden gem of the resort. It's easy to write this thing off. It has the word playground in the title, right? Is this just a little kiddie playground thing? We don't need to check this out. No, you do need to check this out. Go in there, explore, take some photos, just look around this place. There are some really cool special effects in there. There are some really nice sets. And the way you have to discover a lot of it on your own, it makes you feel like a little kid again, you know? It's super, super cool in there. Definitely do check it out. The other things in this indoor area of the park, there's 3 flat rides in there. Jumping Jellyfish, the Whirlpool, and Blowfish Balloon Race. Again, like other flat rides I've talked about, you can understand what these are about just from looking at them. They are unique to here, but there are similar rides elsewhere as well you may have done before. Scuttle Scooters is an outdoor flat ride in this area, which does benefit from being able to look again at DisneySea and how pretty it is. And you're right there on the waterfront, you see the transit steamers come by, which is kind of cool, but yeah, nothing tremendously special. Next to it though, I think is an underrated little kiddie coaster, Flounder's Flying Fish Coaster. They sunk the whole thing into the ground, and it's a really mild kiddie coaster. It's a great My First Roller Coaster for young ones. But it's really, really sweet. The music they play here is really nice. At nighttime, it's lit up beautifully. There's waterfalls and water features everywhere. And the ride vehicles are just so cute. There's not a ton in Mermaid Lagoon for adults to do, so I would push you to check this ride out, just to force you to spend more time in this area. If only there was some really good show inside this area of the park that made lots of people want to come here. Okay, we're into the best part of the best park in the world, Mysterious Island. 2 rides that are completely unique to this park, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth. I'm not gonna go into these here. They're both super unique. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a suspended dark ride that's kind of like Peter Pan, I guess, in that way, but also completely different and not like that at all. And then Journey to the Center of the Earth is the same ride system as Test Track and Radiator Springs Racers, so you get that high-speed kind of dark ride thing. But the way it's presented and packaged and everything, They're just so utterly unique. So you have to do those. They are don't miss, 100%. You will know from Test Track and Radiator Springs Racers that this ride system can get pretty fast. And you may be curious about how fast this one gets or how fast other rides in this resort are. Well, you should check out this video where I talk about the top 9 fastest rides at Tokyo Disney Resort.